She flushed a child's only supply of insulin down the toilet, claiming it was all just HOA policy. Karen Delaney hid behind rules while a 6-year-old boy fought for his life. But his father, Logan Waller, didn't seek revenge. He built a case that left no room for excuses. And you won't believe how this courtroom battle ended. And why justice finally hit harder than anyone expected. Logan Waller never imagined that a routine Saturday would end in the kind of nightmare most parents don't even dare to picture. The morning had been smooth. He'd packed his 6-year-old son, Lucas, into the back seat of their aging Subaru and driven into Tampa for his quarterly endocrinologist appointment. Diabetes type 1 had been part of their lives since Lucas was 3. They were used to the routine: finger pricks, nightly Lantus, carb counts, emergency glucose packs. Logan had memorized the insulin schedule better than his own work calendar. It wasn't ideal, but it was life, and they were surviving it together. After the appointment, Logan swung by the pharmacy to pick up a fresh 28-day supply of insulin. The pharmacist had even commented on how organized Logan's insulin cooler was. "You'd be surprised how many parents forget ice packs," she'd said with a kind smile. Logan had chuckled, then turned to Lucas, who was quietly drawing on the waiting room clipboard, and thought, "We're doing okay." But as they pulled into Cypress Hills, the coastal HOA-governed neighborhood they'd lived in for 2 years, something felt off. Karen Delaney was standing at the curb in front of their townhouse. Logan knew that look: arms crossed, posture stiff, lips pinched so tightly her chin trembled. She wore a perfectly pressed white blouse, pearls that caught the afternoon sun, and a blindingly pink lipstick that looked more like a warning sign than a cosmetic choice. In her hand, a transparent plastic bag. Logan's stomach dropped before he even parked the car. Lucas, still buckled in, looked up at his dad. "Is that the angry lady again?" Logan forced a smile, stepped out, and kept his voice level. "Karen, what's going on?" Karen raised the bag like it was evidence in a trial. "This," she said sharply, "is in direct violation of HOA Code 4, 6.1. Medications, particularly injectables, stored in a shared property refrigerator create a sanitary risk. Not to mention visible syringes within view of neighboring children. I conducted a visual inspection this morning." Logan froze. What are you talking about? That's Lucas's insulin. It was in our fridge in a sealed container inside our home." Karen didn't flinch. Her smile was tight and rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. "That may be," she said, turning toward the small mobile HOA office trailer adjacent to the community pool. "But the rules don't bend for sympathy. Emotional appeals don't override community health standards." Logan followed her, heart pounding, brain catching up to the insane reality unfolding in front of him. "Karen, please put the bag down. That's $900 worth of insulin. That's my son's life. What are you—" But it was already too late. Karen stepped into the trailer, moved swiftly to the tiny bathroom in the corner, lifted the lid of the toilet, and with a flick of her wrist, dumped the contents in. Dozens of syringes, 3 full vials, emergency glucagon pens. All vanished into the bowl with a wet thud. Then she flushed. A sickening gurgle echoed through the trailer. Logan stood rooted to the floor, his fists clenched, a scream caught somewhere deep in his throat. Lucas, now standing in the doorway behind him, looked up confused. "Daddy?" Karen turned around calmly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as the toilet finished its cycle. "I'm sure you can acquire more," she said coolly. "If not, well, I suggest you file a grievance. The HOA board meets Thursday. You're welcome to speak during the 3-minute open forum, but next time, please adhere to community guidelines." Logan stared at her. He could barely hear over the roaring in his ears. His hands trembled. His face burned. All the air in the tiny trailer felt heavy and thick, like trying to breathe underwater. "You're insane," he whispered, his voice raw. "You just flushed away my son's medication. His insulin, that's not just some rule violation. That's attempted murder." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly unmoved. "No need for dramatics," she said, brushing past him like he was an inconvenience, not a father on the edge of breaking. "I'm doing what any responsible board chair would do. If you disagree, there's a process." Logan looked down at Lucas, whose small hand was gripping his. The boy didn't understand what had just happened. Not fully. But he sensed the danger. His bottom lip quivered. Logan tightened his grip and pulled him close, never taking his eyes off the woman who had just, without hesitation, flushed a child's life down a toilet. And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't about rules. This was about control, about someone who'd gotten drunk on authority and decided she knew better than a doctor, better than a parent, better than humanity. She had to be stopped, not just for Lucas. But before she did it again, the pharmacist didn't even blink. "I'm sorry, Mr. Waller. Without a valid prescription, I can't dispense insulin, even in an emergency." Logan stared at her, the cooler bag in his hands growing heavier with every passing second. He had the empty vials, the medical records, the insurance card, everything except the new e-script. Their doctor had promised to send it that morning after the checkup, but apparently something had glitched in the system, or someone forgot. Or maybe the world just decided it was done helping them. "It's for my son," he said, voice trembling. "He's 6, type 1 diabetic. We just had an appointment this morning. The doctor said—" "I believe you," the pharmacist said gently, but with a weariness that meant she'd had this conversation before. "But there's nothing I can do. I'd lose my license." She handed the cooler back over the counter like she was returning a borrowed umbrella. "I wish I could help." By the time Logan stepped out into the sweltering Florida heat, it was almost 6 p.m. The sun had started its descent, but the asphalt still radiated waves of sticky warmth. He put Lucas in the back seat. The boy looked tired, more than usual. His forehead was damp and his speech had slowed. He kept rubbing his eyes and asking if he could go home and lay down. Logan didn't answer. He was already calling another pharmacy, then another, then an ER, a children's hospital, an urgent care clinic. Over and over, the same line. "Without a prescription, we're not authorized to administer or release insulin." He tried their pediatrician's answering service. No response. Their MyChart app. Error. Fax line. Busy. Even the hospital where they had the morning appointment couldn't help. They'd closed at noon. By 8 p.m., Lucas had stopped asking for food. "I don't want to eat, Daddy," he mumbled, lying on the couch under a thin fleece blanket. "If I eat, my sugar goes up, right? But we don't have the shot." Logan knelt beside him, brushing the boy's damp curls away from his face. "You don't need to worry about that," he said softly. "I'll fix it, I promise." He was lying, and they both knew it. Hours dragged. The house was quiet, except for the sound of fans spinning in each room. Logan had lowered the thermostat as far as he could afford to. At one point, he found himself dragging a comforter and a pillow to the tile floor in the kitchen, right in front of the refrigerator. He wrapped Lucas in the thickest blanket he could find, sat him down gently against the cool metal door, and cradled him. It wasn't medicine, but at least it was cold. At least it was something. Lucas drifted off. Logan stayed up, scrolling message boards, typing desperate posts on Reddit, Twitter, anywhere. "Any ER in Central Florida that will help a diabetic child without script? Insulin alternatives. Please." No one answered, and then 3:47. In ASM, Lucas convulsed. His tiny frame shook so hard Logan thought for one horrifying second that he was seizing. But it wasn't a seizure. It was a violent shiver that came from the inside out. His lips were pale, his fingers curled like claws. "Daddy," he whimpered, barely audible. "My belly hurts." Logan didn't hesitate. He dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. One of them, a woman, maybe early 30s, tired eyes, blunt voice, knelt beside Lucas and checked his vitals. The other started prepping a stretcher. "What's his condition?" Logan asked, voice dry. The medic didn't look up. "Blood sugars through the roof. Kid's going into early ketoacidosis." Logan blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means without insulin, he won't make it through the day." The words hit him like a bat to the chest. His knees buckled slightly, but he didn't fall. Just stood there, paralyzed, watching them lift his son, his everything, onto the stretcher like he was already halfway gone. The ambulance ride was short. 10 minutes to Baycare Medical. Logan sat in the back, clutching Lucas's backpack to his chest, unable to stop the tremor in his hands. He kept staring at his son's small feet, still in Spider-Man socks, wondering how the hell they got here, and in his mind, over and over, like a scratched record. One thought refused to leave. She did this. She really did this. That woman flushed my son's medicine down a toilet, and now he might die. His jaw clenched. His throat tightened. He reached for Lucas's hand and squeezed it gently. "I'm so sorry, buddy," he whispered, "but I swear to you, I'll make this right." And he meant it. With every inch of his breaking, burning heart, he meant it. Lucas survived. Barely. 3 days in the pediatric ICU, attached to more wires than any 6-year-old should ever have to see. Monitors beeped rhythmically around the clock. A nasal cannula hissed with oxygen. IVs dripped with a steady mechanical pulse. Nurses moved quietly, speaking in whispers. The staff referred to him as our little angel. Some said it was a miracle. One doctor, an older man with silver hair and tired eyes, stood at the end of the bed and shook his head. "I've seen kids not make it through a fraction of this. He's strong." Logan sat in a stiff plastic chair for 72 hours, barely moving, barely eating. He never left Lucas's side. He watched every breath rise and fall like it was the last. The fear hadn't passed. It had simply calcified into something colder, something sharper. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't beg the universe for fairness. He took notes. When Lucas finally opened his eyes, it was slow, like a flower in winter, unsure if the light was real. His lips were dry. His voice was barely more than a breath. "Daddy?" Logan leaned forward and took his son's hand, nodding quickly, trying to smile. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here." That moment, just that single word, ignited something in Logan that hadn't existed before. Something beyond anger, beyond fear, conviction. This wasn't some tragic accident. It wasn't just red tape or a careless policy. A woman, a neighbor, made a conscious choice to destroy life-saving medication. She knew what it was. She handled it. She looked at it, read the labels, and flushed it anyway. And Logan had evidence. He left the hospital that night for the first time, only after a nurse promised to call him the second anything changed. He drove home, opened his laptop, and downloaded the footage from the HOA security camera. He'd requested access the moment Lucas was stable. There it was, clear as day, Karen Delaney, standing in the small office bathroom, holding the plastic bag, unscrewing the insulin vials, and methodically pouring them into the toilet. Her face was blank. Not angry, not panicked, just cold. Empty, like someone filing papers or rinsing dishes. Then she flushed. Twice. The rage that bloomed in Logan's chest didn't explode. It crystallized. The next morning, he met with 3 attorneys. 2 declined. They said HOA lawsuits were complicated. One said it was more of a civil matter. The third, Kristen Holloway, said nothing at first. She just watched the footage. When it ended, she looked up at Logan with eyes that burned like his. "My daughter is type 1, she said quietly. "She almost died once because of a pharmacy delay. I know exactly what this means." She tapped the video, still showing Karen with her hand on the toilet handle. "This isn't negligence," Kristen said. "This is intent, and we're going to treat it that way. We'll file on 3 counts: destruction of critical medical supplies, endangerment of a minor, and attempted murder." Logan nodded once. That was all he needed to hear. The legal machine moved quickly after that. Kristen was relentless. She filed subpoenas, pulled HOA records, demanded public statements, and soon the press caught wind. Within a week, headlines were everywhere. Woman flushes child's insulin. Boy hospitalized in diabetic coma. HOA, president accused of attempted murder over medication dispute. Cypress Hills community erupts as lawsuit names HOA chair in child endangerment case. The story went viral. Parent blogs, diabetes forums, national advocacy groups. Twitter exploded with outrage. Instagram flooded with photos of children holding signs. "I need my insulin. Would you flush mine too?" Karen Delaney tried to respond, first through a tone-deaf Facebook post. "Rules exist for a reason. We can't allow hysteria to override safety." Then through her lawyer, who issued a public statement saying she believed the contents were potentially hazardous and improperly stored, and acted within her authority as HOA chair. But no one bought it. Even her own attorney seemed uneasy during the preliminary hearing, avoiding her gaze as the prosecutor played the video in open court. When asked if she recognized the bag, Karen folded her arms and muttered, "I thought it was something else. I didn't know." But the timestamp was clear. The pharmacy receipt in Logan's hand was clear. The doctor's note confirming the medication was freshly filled. All of it was clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision. And the entire county was about to watch what happened when someone decided they were above humanity. Karen Delaney sat stiffly in her navy suit, pearls at her throat, hands clenched in her lap. Her face twitched with tension. Her husband sat across the aisle, silent, distant. Even her attorney looked tired. When the judge entered, she straightened her back like posture could save her. Before testimony began, her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we ask this not be turned into a political circus. My client followed HOA protocols. This is a misunderstanding, nothing more." The judge didn't respond, just nodded. Logan took the stand. He spoke clearly without anger, but every word landed like a strike. "My son nearly died because a woman didn't like the look of syringes in our fridge. He begged not to eat dinner because he was scared we had no insulin, and he was right. That night I held him while he shook, while he cried, while he slipped away." He glanced at Karen, voice low. She flushed it. "My son's medicine, like trash." The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor stood and read the charges. 1. Willful destruction of life-saving medication. 2. Reckless endangerment of a minor. 3. Interference with medical treatment. 4. Attempted murder. Karen went pale. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. The judge leaned forward. "I haven't seen this level of deliberate cruelty since People v. Hilburn. You knew exactly what you were doing." Karen's hands shook. She tried to stand, but her heel slipped. She collapsed onto the floor with a dull thud. Her pearls scattered across the tile. No one moved, not her husband, not her attorney, not the guards. She scrambled up, breathless, humiliated. Logan didn't even turn to look. The gavel dropped. And justice began. Karen Delaney had prepared for many outcomes. A fine, perhaps. Community service. Maybe even probation, though her lawyer said that was unlikely. But what she hadn't prepared for, what no one had warned her about, was the cold finality in the prosecutor's voice when he stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, given the facts of this case and the complete lack of remorse shown by the defendant, the state formally requests immediate remand into custody pending sentencing. The defendant has demonstrated deliberate, willful actions that endangered a child's life. This was not an accident. This was calculated." He didn't look at his notes. He looked directly at her. She destroyed a child's medication, then watched him fight for his life. And she has shown nothing but defensiveness, deflection, and entitlement. The state believes she poses a continued threat to public safety. Karen blinked rapidly. Her mouth parted. She turned to her attorney, confused, like maybe she'd misunderstood. Her lawyer shot up, adjusting his tie with a shaky hand. "Your Honor," he said sharply, "with all due respect, this is a gross overreach. We're talking about a community regulation issue, an HOA rules dispute that's being blown out of proportion by media hysteria. My client has no prior record. She's not a flight risk." He gestured to Karen like a stage actor appealing to a sympathetic crowd. "She's not a criminal. She's a homeowner." The courtroom was dead silent. The judge didn't look amused. He raised the gavel but paused before speaking. "This court disagrees," he said slowly. "This isn't about HOA bylaws. This isn't about misplaced protocol. This is about a conscious act that nearly resulted in the death of a child." His eyes settled on Karen. "And from where I'm sitting, I see no remorse. I see no accountability. I see only someone trying to hide behind rules to excuse cruelty." Then sharply, "Remand granted. Officers, take her into custody until sentencing." The gavel fell with a hard crack. Karen froze. "No, no, wait!" she gasped, shooting to her feet. "What? You can't, this is ridiculous." The two bailiffs moved quickly, flanking her on either side. One gently took her left arm, the other her right. Karen jerked away, her voice rising. "I was following the rules," she shouted, eyes wide with panic. "I did what the guidelines said." Her attorney tried to calm her, murmuring, "Karen, stop. Don't resist." But she wasn't listening. Her face twisted into disbelief. She turned to the gallery. "I'm not a monster. I was protecting the community. That fridge wasn't, there were syringes. I was doing my job. She tried to grab onto the armrest of her chair, clinging to it like it was the last anchor to normalcy. The bailiff had to peel her fingers off one by one. Her screams echoed in the room. "This is insane. I'm not a criminal." The judge didn't respond. He had already left the bench. Karen was pulled toward the side door, still shouting. Her voice cracked. "I followed the rules. I followed the rules." No one moved. No one offered sympathy. Not even her husband. He sat still, arms folded, looking away. In the front row, Logan sat motionless, watching. But there was no relief on his face, no smile, no triumph. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm you didn't want, but had to survive. He didn't feel vindicated. He didn't feel powerful. He felt hollow, because what he had just witnessed wasn't justice dancing in glory. It was justice dragging itself forward, finally, after too many delays. It was heavy, brutal, slow, and necessary. Logan lowered his eyes. One thought echoed through him, not as rage now, but as understanding. This is how far cruelty can go when it's dressed up as order, and how far people will let it go until someone finally says enough. The next morning, Logan's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Everyone wanted an interview, a statement, his face on a screen. He turned the phone off. He didn't want the cameras. He didn't want to be the headline. He just wanted one thing, his son safe and quiet. Lucas lay at home, curled under the patchwork quilt his mother had sewn before she passed. Stuffed animals surrounded him, his dragon, his faded Batman. His eyes were tired, but when Logan sat beside him, he smiled softly. "Dad," he whispered, "she can't do that again, right?" Logan swallowed and nodded. "Never again, buddy." Lucas reached out and grabbed his hand, small, fragile, but alive. And for the first time in days, Logan let himself breathe. Later that afternoon, someone knocked. Mrs. Rivera stood at the door, holding a folder. "She threw out my husband's wheelchair," she said quietly, "called it clutter. We never reported it. We didn't think it would matter." Then came a teenage girl with her mother. The girl handed Logan a note and complaint papers. "She kicked me out of the pool," the girl signed, "because I'm deaf. Said my hands were scaring the others." Her mother's voice shook. "We didn't know we could say anything until now." All this time, people had stayed silent, afraid, ashamed. Karen had made them feel powerless. Until Lucas, until one father refused to look away. And now, finally, others were stepping forward too. The final hearing drew a full crowd. Every bench in the courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, activists, even HOA members who hadn't been seen in months. The room buzzed with a tense, almost reverent silence, as if everyone knew history was about to be made in that small Florida courtroom. Karen Delaney sat at the defense table, no longer hidden behind legal briefs or lawyerly confidence. Her hair was undone, her face pale. She gripped a tissue in one hand and trembled with every breath. This time, she didn't let her attorney speak for her. She stood. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't want to hurt that boy. She wiped at her eyes, breathing hard. "I just wanted order, safety. There were syringes in that fridge. What if they'd leaked? What if someone got sick?" The room remained silent. "I was trying to protect the community," she pleaded. "People don't understand how much pressure I was under. The board, the emails, the complaints, everyone hated me. I thought I was doing the right thing." She looked to the judge like a drowning person reaching for air. "I didn't think it would go that far." The judge didn't blink. "You were afraid of a fridge," he said coldly. "The child you endangered was fighting for his life." Karen's lip quivered. She clutched the podium like it might hold her together. I just followed the rules." From the prosecutor's table, the state attorney stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Karen Delaney did not make a mistake," she said. "She destroyed the only supply of medication that kept a child alive. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not protocol. That is a crime." The words echoed in the room. "This case isn't about HOA guidelines," the prosecutor continued. "It's about a 6-year-old boy who nearly died because someone chose ego over empathy, power over humanity." Karen shook her head, silently mouthing no, but said nothing else. The courtroom held its breath as the judge looked down at the papers before him. He spoke slowly, deliberately. In the matter of the state versus Karen Delaney, this court finds the defendant guilty on all counts. The room remained still, frozen in time. For the charge of reckless endangerment of a minor, guilty. For the destruction of life-sustaining medical property, guilty. For willful interference with emergency medical care, guilty. And for attempted murder of a minor, guilty. Karen let out a sound, a choked, gasping sob that barely escaped her throat. Her knees buckled slightly. Her attorney reached out to steady her, but she didn't respond. The judge continued, voice unwavering. Sentencing is as follows. 10 years incarceration in a state correctional facility, no possibility of parole. A review hearing may be scheduled after 5 years at the court's discretion. The gavel came down, final, heavy. Karen collapsed into her chair, not screaming, not protesting, just weeping quietly. Logan sat in the gallery, unmoving. Lucas wasn't with him, too young to see this, but Logan wished, just for a moment, that his son could feel what this meant, that someone, finally, had said what needed to be said, that this horror was real, and it had consequences. The courtroom stood as the judge exited. One by one, everyone filed out in silence. No cheers, no applause, just justice, and the long, aching quiet that followed it. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had thinned. The reporters had gotten their quotes, the cameras had shut off, and the buzz of the day was already heading into newsrooms and headlines. Logan stepped out into the cool afternoon air, his shoulders heavy but no longer burdened. The weight he carried now wasn't pain. It was the weight of having done the right thing, no matter how long and brutal the road had been. As he made his way down the steps, a familiar voice called out to him. It was Officer Ramirez, a local cop who patrolled their neighborhood. A solid man with kind eyes, the kind of guy who always offered a wave to kids on bikes and remembered your dog's name. You really held it together in there, Ramirez said, walking up beside him. Most folks would have lost it on her. Hell, I've seen people snap over a parking ticket. But you kept it clean. You went the whole way. Logan gave a tired smile. His voice came low, almost like an exhale. I didn't want revenge, he said. I just wanted my son to stop living in fear. Ramirez nodded, clapped him gently on the shoulder, and walked off. By that evening, the news cycle had exploded. HOA president sentenced to 10 years for destroying child's life-saving medication. Woman who hid behind rules faces justice in landmark Florida case. When policy becomes weapon, the case that shook Cypress Hills. The ripple effect was immediate. Half the HOA board in Cypress Hills resigned within days. Quiet confessions trickled in from former members. Karen had bullied them, threatened them, manipulated policies to get what she wanted. One admitted she was afraid to breathe wrong around her. At the emergency meeting, a new chair was elected. Her name was Megan Porter, a single mom of a boy on the autism spectrum. Her first statement made local headlines on its own. The rules will now serve the people, not the other way around. And just like that, the neighborhood began to shift. That night, Logan and Lucas took a walk through the neighborhood. The streets were calm. The sun had just dipped behind the houses, casting golden streaks across the pavement. Lucas walked slowly, holding his father's hand. Neighbors waved from porches. A few approached with smiles, handing over toys, cookies, little notes. One woman offered a plush bear. Another pressed a card into Lucas's hand, her eyes misty. "You're very brave," she whispered. Logan said thank you more times than he could count, but each word, each gesture, felt like a stitch in something that had been torn wide open. They walked in silence until Lucas finally looked up. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" Lucas's voice was small. "Is it going to be okay now?" Logan paused. He looked up at the sky, where the first stars had started to peek through the fading light. Then he looked down at his son, this boy who had survived more than most men. "Yes," he said, "now it's going to be okay." Lucas squeezed his hand, and Logan added, almost to himself, but loud enough for the night to hear, because one voice, even small, even scared, can still change everything. And sometimes that voice speaks louder than 100 rules written in ink.